Journalist, author, poet, editor and publisher, Sierhey Khmara Ziniak was a passionate advocate of multiculturalism. In 1949, after the Second World War, Ziniak came to Canada and continued his journalistic profession. He began publishing the country's first newspaper in the Byelorussian language called the Byelorussian Voice. In 1952, he started the Mutual Cooperation League, representing 20 ethnic organizations in Central and Eastern Europe. It continued until 1962. He began the Canadian Ethnic Journalists and Writers Club in 1978 after the realization to have the need of an organization that was inclusive. Not only have publishers, but broadcasters, writers and reporters as well. He was the inaugural executive director with over 200 publishers, writers and editors from ethnic print, radio and television. He believed ethnic journalists should promote the values of Canadian citizenship and report on Canadian affairs as well as those on their homelands. His initiative would prove to be a true ethnic and multicultural form. In 2006, the name changed to the Canadian Ethnic Media Association to be inclusive of the new emerging media. After the years of successfully reflecting the role of ethnic media, the ideals of Ziniak continued to guide the work of this organization into the future.
And I say to myself, what a wonderful world. Yes, I say to myself, what a wonderful world. It's okay, I'm sure there are people who are sitting there saying, keep your day job. Madeline, my friend, to receive such an award in your dad's name, and remembering him, and also a little bit of a shock for me tonight because I didn't know Vera had passed on. She also was, and I used to call her secretly the bossy lady, the one who was always saying, stand here, move there, move to the side, hold it up higher. May she rest. May she rest in peace. I'm sure she's with the angels. Members of Parliament, members of the Provincial Parliament, Mr. Mayor, former Mayor, all you distinguished people, and I see a few of my Caribbean friends, and those of you who tonight wish you were from the Caribbean because of the temperature out there. When I came to Toronto in 1960, Toronto was a different place, and Canada was a different place. We had no Charter of Rights and Freedom. We had no Human Rights Code and Commission as we know it today. We had no Landlord and Tenant Act. We had no police and community relations. We had no school board talking to parents or even keeping their doors open for programs outside of the school day. The doors were closed at 4:30. The caretaker was king of the castle. He locked the doors, locked the gate, and that was it. There were so many different ways in which we, as newcomers to Canadian society, did not find welcoming. In the media, I think you can count less than 3 very visible faces. If there was any announcement to be made or any commentary to be made on anything, Janice Stein was it. If there was anything that we needed to ensure that Canadian society was aware of, we had to depend on the people to do the research and to write it for us. And you heard Madeleine tell the story of the federal government, after all that we had gone through, that we were not just English and French, but that we were a multicultural, multi-ethnic, multi-religious society. And that there had to be room for each and every one of us within that society. And as we expanded that discussion, and we complained, yes indeed we complained, about the way in which the traditional media was reflecting on the stories, interpreting the dances, interpreting the community to us and to Canadian society in general, we were able to convince the federal government to have an envelope that enabled 79 different communities to go to Ryerson. At the time, it was not Ryerson University, it was Ryerson Polytechnic, and to have 100 hours of media education. In other words, they were educating us as members of ethnic and cultural groups as to what was entailed in the work of the media and the people who were in the media. So we learned how to put gels on lights. We learned how to operate a radio, I forget all the terminology now, but all those doodads to get volume up and volume down. We learned how programs were put together. And at the end of the 100 hours, they sent us out into our communities, back into our communities, with the sense that we were now educated about the media. Many of us, and I shouldn't say many of us, I should say many from the group, became the first commentators, journalists, writers, and television people, so that when the multicultural station opened up and made room for all of the ethnic voices, we had some people ready, well prepared, with 100 hours to take and to respond to the needs at the time. I remember a group of us from the Black community going to the CBC and pleading, I won't call his name, but I think you know who it was at the time, please, let's see some people of color. Let's have some other commentators on Africa, on the Caribbean, on the Black world in general. And I remember him picking up and sending his staff, actually, to go bring the Rolodeck. And I'm sitting there saying, the Rolodeck, what's the Rolodeck? And the Rolodeck came, and it was a great big thing with cards in it. Does anybody here remember those Rolodeck? And so when they wanted to find someone to speak on a certain subject, they went to the Rolodeck. And he said to me, go through the Rolodeck, and when you find some Black person, pull it out And the next time we'll call him, and of course I went through about a third of it, didn't see any faces or names that I recognized. And so he sent us away to do our homework. Go and get some names and resumes and people with experience and come back and talk to us when we had some names to offer. I'm so very pleased that things have changed. Things have changed, that any and all of our Canadian stations, radio, television, and otherwise, we see the many faces, we hear the many languages, and we see people working together. When CEMA was formed, the founding members were visionaries with a mission to ensure that there was fairness, equity, and inclusion of all the voices. And I think it's important that we've come these 41 years. And times have changed and things have changed, and our young people need to understand the activism, the pushing against the system, the many consultations, the many white paper, and the advocacy with and finding people in government who were not only empathetic, but people in government who were part of and understood that we all had work to do. And there are some people who stand out over the years, who've assisted, who've made space for, and who have encouraged the expansion of languages, cultures, and others in Canadian society. I think it's important that as we celebrate this 41st anniversary, that we remember all those who came before, who threw breadcrumbs so that we can follow, who made the way such that it has strengthened us and continues to strengthen us, that we've made gains, but those are gains that can easily be set back in various and varying ways unless we're vigilant. And so to have an association, to have people coming together, to have a board, to have voices, to contribute to this organization, to support this notion, it's really something that we all must do. And I'm so pleased that there were young people, younger people in the room. I just turned 82 years old. And so when I see people in their 20s following, coming along, doing the work, receiving awards, recognizing who we are, that in Canadian society we are both the message and the messenger of what Canada is about. And when we stand in any part of the world, any sphere in the world, in any endeavor, any place in the world, we stand as Canadians, and we stand with the affirmation that we know that we're building something that is really real. I want to end with something that I picked up a number of years ago, and some of you may have heard me repeat that. And that was I was in the southern part of the United States at a conference, and there was this superintendent of education who was talking about the progress that was made by African Americans. And he was not only just a superintendent of education, I think he had a little bit of the pastor in him, the preacher in him, because he ended with those words, and I always found them most appropriate for where we are. He said, "We ain't where we could be. We ain't where we should be. We ain't where we ought to be. But thank God we ain't where we was." And I think we all can say that. We ain't where we was, and so we have work to do, and we have to continue to support this organization. We have to continue to lend our voices. We have to continue to be activists in our own right, and we have to continue to do this innovative work for which tonight we have applauded and recognized the other awardees who came before me. So I thank you so much for this. It's like a memory lane for me. It's a recognition that is beyond my expectation. When Madeline called me, I thought, oh, they remember me. And when I saw people like Irene tonight, and I see and hear from so many who come up to say hello, what we were doing, because my children would say, what we were doing in the olden days have somehow or the other has grown, is flowering, and hopefully Canadian society is all the better for your work, for CEMA, and for all those who were visionaries at a time when we needed visionaries. Merci beaucoup et bonsoir.